Good afternoon, everybody listening to our chat today. Welcome. Hopefully we won't keep you too long. I know you're all very busy. And today we are so honored to have Willem van der Post here. I'm going to give him a chance to just introduce him to you guys a little bit later. But I think, Willem, firstly, just from our side, a big thank you for your time. I really do appreciate that. I know you're a very busy man in the space that you operate in. So, yeah, we as Pragmatarians really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me, Stéphan. Sorry.
It's only a pleasure. So, Willem, maybe just to set the context of our discussion today, this forms part of a series of discussions that we had around our Beat culture model. Now, this is a model that's based on 5 principles. I think Pragmatarians by now would know what they are. Today, we're going to specifically talk about the last principle called creative innovation. Now, you're not really going to be successful with creative innovation if the other 4 are not in place and working in your organization. Now, the other 4 is firstly trust. Secondly, alternative controls. So giving your employees different ways of operating themselves without a whole lot of controls in place. Alternative controls. There's the self-management aspect. Again, the autonomy that you give your employees to do certain things. And then lastly, extreme stakeholder alignment, where we talk about stuff like the outside-in perspective, where you really need to make sure that what you do actually, fulfills a need that your clients might have. So we've gone through all 4 of those, and I'm not saying that we're perfect in all of them, but today we are moving into the last principle called creative innovation. And we talk about the pillars of creative innovation called creative space. So creating the space in which people can be creative and innovative. There's entrepreneurship. So, not just ideating, but, incubating those ideas and scaling them up to something that will give your, organization a new income stream. And then the aspect of continuous experimentation. So are we allowing people to try things and to, are we creating a budget where these new ideas can be scaled up and we can try and fail and eventually get something that really puts us at another level? So yeah, the background is that we need to obviously focus on this very important aspect in our business. We live in a crazy, fast changing world, as you know. And, it's often said that if you don't disrupt your own business, somebody else is going to disrupt it for you and make your services and your business irrelevant. And I think that's so true. And that's actually a scary aspect. And if we as an organization, as Pragma, if we're not going to think about how we're going to use these new technologies to come up with creative new ways of wowing our clients and really adding value to our clients, we are going to become irrelevant, and that is not a great thought to have. So this is something that is serious that we need to focus on, and we need to basically create the future of our business. So long story, but I think that context is important. And with all of that being said, I can't wait to hear your insights and thoughts about this exciting topic. But let's maybe just start quickly. Who is Willem van der Post? Maybe a bit of your background, your business dealings that you had, and why are you energized about the topic of innovation, Willem?
Okay, well, firstly, Stéphan, thank you very much for having me. I hope that some value can come out of this conversation to others. I don't really like to talk about myself too much, so I'll give you the short version is
No problem.
I'm a trained chartered accountant, but I like to think of myself as a reformed chartered accountant. And basically, I've been trying very hard to forget all of the IFRS stuff that's been put into my head from university days, sometimes successfully so. I used to be an audit partner at one of the big 4 auditing firms, moved into consulting, and I think that's where I first shook hands with the concept of innovation, disruption. I spent a lot of time in places like Tel Aviv and Amsterdam, and specifically Silicon Valley, known as innovation cradles of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and then came to the realization that I want to be building stuff in that space as opposed to talking about it.
Okay.
And so I started 2 venture firms. The first is called xTech.Capital. It looks at maturation periods of its cutting edge investments in a sort of 8 to 12 year time frame. And then simple.Capital, which is the democratization of venture capital, specifically for large corporates, but also for individuals. And those sort of maturity timeframes are between 3 and 5, 6, 7 years. And so from those 2 venture funds, as they are predominantly aimed at highly innovative business models that utilize technology to achieve scale and velocity, I think some of the perspective that I am able to add to a conversation is to what's being incubated right now that will impact the business landscape in its next iteration.
Mm-hmm.
On the long side and on the short side, what can we do from a stakeholder returns perspective in the medium to short term to still derive benefits for the shareholders of this generation? So it's a nice balance between zooming into the future and then what can we do now?
And maybe just a in-between question: how successful, is that ventures and are companies grabbing onto this and taking the opportunities that is out there and that you guys create through what you do?
So the funds have got different mandates. We hunt for ourselves, but we also hunt on behalf of our clients. And depending on how refined and accurate and diligently corporate puts together their hunting mandates determines to a very large extent what we look for and by extension whether or not it's successful. South Africa is in a unique situation in that the problems that the country exhibit are all in some way or another inextricably tied to an economic opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's about whether the perspective is there to seize that as an opportunity or to, you'll forgive my French here, but to sit on the couch and bitch about it.
Yeah.
Which is what unfortunately a lot of people end up doing.
Unfortunately, yes.
And so the wonderful thing about both these funds is that they look for investment opportunities globally, in that there might be a solution in Tel Aviv that works in Durban, and there might be a solution that sits in Silicon Valley that works in Cape Town, or the other way around. And so we're not limited to only looking at local entrepreneurship and local innovation. We play in the global space, and that has certainly aided our efforts in being successful at this game.
That sounds like you will never have a dull moment in your day. It sounds very exciting, and I know before this meeting you had a hectic time. So again, appreciation for chatting to us. But I think, Willem, let's just take one step back. When we talk innovation, it's a buzzword, and we need to innovate. There's different levels of our organization listening to this recording now. Let's try and explain the concept of innovation in a business context. What exactly is it in your view?
So firstly, it's my view, and much like the word value, there's a lot of ambiguity and personal investment into words like this. And so ask 30 people in a room, you'll get 40 different answers. I would say this: innovation is not digitizing old standard operating procedures. It's way beyond that. And perhaps to take this very broad concept and distill it into a more digestible series of components, we like to break the innovation conversation into 3 lenses: innovation around your business of today, innovation around edge business opportunities, and innovation as regards your future business models. The easiest example to cite here is the evolution of Amazon. If you drew a line around 2005, argument's sake, and you'd say, all right, what is Amazon today? It was a retailer. It started off as a bookshop, but then sold on a platform many different things. So it retailed A to Z. An edge business that evolved for Amazon was Amazon Web Services. It evolved through the utilization of the very large consumer base that Amazon had captured up to that point, for which recommendations needed to be made using data analytics, which required a hell of a lot of computing power, such as to be able to facilitate up and cross-sell. A future business model in those days was space travel and space exploration, which they've put under the subsidiary of Blue Origin, and you would have seen Jeff Bezos in space not too long ago.
Yeah.
On exactly that very nascent, very early, very risky investment into what they believe. Yeah. Very different investment into what they believe the future would constitute for them. And by the way, that's not the only thing that Amazon have. They've got 20 different moonshot-esque disruptive plays where they're trying to beat the market before the market beats them. Now, interestingly, the complication, I think, arises in where do you draw the line between business of today and edge businesses, and where do you draw the line between edge and future?
Yeah.
And what I see is leadership teams that are too academic and too technical, that suffer a little bit of analysis paralysis, ending up with corporate inertia, debating where the line should be drawn. And that's the wrong conversation to be in. The fact is that you need to have these three separate conversations, except that they will overlap somewhat. To the extent such that today the Amazon Group CEO is the ex-AWS CEO. In other words, an edge business that was so successful and grew to the extent such that it had so much impetus that a leader in that space could be the leader for the group. And that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
We've seen that a number of times. So first of all, split the conversation and know which conversation you are in, because sometimes those edge businesses or future business models might be to the detriment of the current business model. And should they politically meet in the same boardroom, business of today will always win, always, because it pays for everything currently.
Yeah.
And so more often than not, the success of business of today is the jeopardy of edge and future business models. And if you zoom out, you're actually engineering inertia in your organization if you don't split it.
Exactly. So I think that covers sort of the question that I had around, the structures of the way that in which you need to structure your business. I've read a book recently called Corporate Explorer, how big businesses can actually outshine startups in terms of innovation and new products. And they talk very specifically about the importance of having people dedicated to the innovation game within, or still having access to they call it the core business assets. So, that might include technologies, that might include a list of clients where you can test these new ideas. So maybe expand a little bit on structure and how the typical business like us that's been running a very successful, enterprise asset management business for the last 50 years. But I think our danger is that we are now so fixed to the success of what always has worked in the past that we find it difficult to almost break free and to say, okay, let's just think differently also in the way that we are structured. What would you... Let's say a company comes to you and say, hey, how do we need to be structured to make this work? What have you seen is successful?
Okay. Principle number one, you need to break free from being a prisoner of your own success. The insurance industry is a wonderful example of that. Old insurance that for 100 years has been successful, made profit, delivered value back to shareholders, now finds it very hard to break away from brokers and invest into insurtech type companies that could give them an edge in the future, but could be to the detriment of the brokers today. And the equivalent of that is prevalent in most industries, ranging retail and in fact, even professional services. So there's a breakaway thinking set required. The consequence of that is that innovation is not something that happens at night. You cannot have business of today KPIs and be expected to go look for those efficiencies or revolutionary ideas in your family time or in your shower time or in your gym time.
Okay.
Sometimes
Running
it happens.
Time, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Exactly. Happenstance in that sort of time of your day. But unless you have dedicated talent that you deliberately mobilize and structure to be able to seek out these innovation opportunities, your chances are just so very diminished by doing it on a happenstance basis. And so that enters or segues into the structuring conversation. Even if you philosophically are able to divide your business into those three different lenses, You still
Yeah.
need to be very deliberate about how you statutorily and functionally structure your organization to enable that kind of thinking on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
In other words, allowing business of today to get better at it, to seek innovative technology that you apply into finding more revenue or saving more costs, and then deliberately looking for edge business opportunities that leverage, as you say, customer base, brand, point of presence, IP perhaps, and then very deliberately make investments and of time and money into these future business models. So what we advise is create a separate statutory entity,
Okay.
Venture X, capitalize Venture X with money that cannot be taken back once you review the budget or get a bit of shareholder pressure. Now, I just say this contextually. South Africa is very far, Africa and South Africa in this regard has got a lot of maturity to still unwind and go through in order to catch up with some of the first world. 10 years ago, if you were an American CEO and you spoke of a Venture X type initiative that purposefully, deliberately invested in the future, you were a maverick. If today you don't have such a structure, you're considered negligent. And so I'm seeing more and more local enterprise realizing that this needs to be a formalized process because it's not going to happen at night. And the rule of thumb is about 2 to 5% of profit before tax every year capitalized into this vehicle that has a very deliberate mandate specific to each of those three lenses, which gets recalibrated as learnings make their way into the mothership to inform more accurately what those mandates should be seeking and hunting for on a deliberate day in, day out basis. Point one. Point two, that statutory entity needs to have a leader that doesn't really fit the box. It must be, Stéphan, it must be someone that's a bit of a pain in the ass in your business because they can do the job that you gave them, but it's not in their heart and not in their blood and not in their DNA. It's someone that is a little bit of an entrepreneur, but not outside of the organization. We call them an intrapreneur. And then you must capacitate that person with the cash that we've spoken of, but also the political willpower, which means it needs to be someone that reports directly to the CEO or the board, such as to enable some of these opportunities, which sometimes cannibalizes a little bit of the business of today market in the short term, but in the medium to long term can be quantums of the old business.
Mind-blowing. And, it makes me think, how much we probably still need to do to get this right. But I think as a 16-year veteran of Pragma, this is really, really exciting. And I'm glad I could at least be part of making people think about this and not only think, hopefully very soon also do. And I think that what has made Pragma so successful in the past is Adrian, our CEO, has quite the knack to surround himself with people that is perhaps a little bit different, new ventures, new ideas. I think of, my previous role was in the OD space, in the creation of a great culture, etc. And 12, 13 years ago when we started that, there was a lot of frowns and what is this, and it's different and it's not normal, and I think we're going through that same space now again, where we need to make sort of difficult decisions, not difficult per se, but difficult because we are not used to these kind of decisions, not used to say 2 to 5% of our profit before tax, capitalize this into a new venture like this. So I think for everybody listening, this is extremely, extremely insightful. So thanks for that. I think when it comes to, let's say, the space where all of this is not yet in place, so we sort of stuck in the business of the day, focusing on that, making sure that we don't lose clients, that we add value, that we keep our clients, etc. That core business, our KPI, everything is around that. But while we wait, for this new venture, new structure to be in place, what can team leaders do on a day-to-day basis to almost create that culture of innovation? And maybe I want to lead into the next question as well. You once told me in a previous chat that we had, and you mentioned in Afrikaans, moenie die koei paai teer nie. So I'm going to try and translate. Don't go and tar the old cattle paths. That's not innovation. So what are some of the things that our team leaders can do in the meantime to sort of lay the foundation for where we are heading as an organization in terms of innovation?
I would first of all tie performance and compensation measurements into innovation per se. So leaders need to think about how they view innovation. And in the business of today, if we were to say, what do we do in that space only, then I would say introduce measures that are punitive for doing the same thing over and over and over, where technology could play a role to make it cheaper, faster, simpler. Then introduce positive incentive to try to do that recon that you do every month in Excel with some form of automation, some form of, I hate the word, but AI, to get it faster, quicker, more accurate. And even if the attempt fails, you are rewarding the attempt at trying, not the result.
Yeah.
And should you get a case where you have an attempt and a good result, have major reward for that. In other words, it becomes punitive to do things in the same way over and over and expect that innovation is going to happen. It won't. People, as a general species, will be like water and seek the path of least resistance. And so if I'm not penalized for doing the same thing over and over, I'm going to do it. Because I also have a life, and I don't want to spend my running and shower time thinking about Pragma only. I have other stuff in life.
Yes, of course.
So if you can disincentivize repeat behavior, incentivize the attempt to do innovation, and super incentivize successful innovation, you are laying one of the foundational items in creating a culture where the organization as a whole attracts more people that are incentivized by virtue of this sort of environment. And you know, subsequent to that, you've got to see what you have. What do I have as a team that stands? Do I have a team that actually only wants to do some of the business of today's stuff? And these types of measurements will help shake the tree to see what is my talent pool like. Perhaps some of these individuals do need to go into edge business opportunities and others into future. But for that, there's a larger organizational reform in structure that needs to take place first, which means this is a leadership thing. It is the leaders collectively of the organization that will, through their actions and choices, determine whether or not innovation becomes a part of the synonym with Pragma. Stéphan, I want to talk your head off, but I'll just say this. We did an exercise where we took the great financial crisis as an indicator of big change in industry. Then we took a whole bunch of companies and we assessed how their leaders acted and made choices in the face of, call it, rewriting of the macro rules of an industry, which the great financial crisis induced, which COVID induced, which working from home in some ways is inducing, which connectivity at fiber line speeds from across the world is inducing, digital nomading. Okay, so within change, how did the leaders react? In the first batch of companies, we said, how much are they spending on innovation and how much are they spending on attacking the market? And then we also indexed what is their revenue and what is their market share. And companies that saw the great financial crisis as a moment to panic and to hold back and to say, button the hatches, play it safe, place only sure bets, saw the drop in the spend associated with innovation and progress, and concomitantly saw a petering out of revenue and of market share. A handful of companies in every industry said, no way, the rules are being rewritten. This is our time to act, and doubled the innovation spend and doubled their attack on the market. And subsequently had a massive spike in both revenue as well as market share. And then, of course, the test years later, 3-4 years post-crisis, when those spends normalized again. So now we're back to what we used to do. The first batch of companies could only recover up to 60% of what they had previously had. And that difference went to a much smaller number of other companies, which means that they almost doubled in size. So leadership is the change that we're experiencing or standing on the forefront of big artificial intelligence changes, big machine learning changes, huge technological and societal and cultural changes coming our way at once.
Yeah.
Are we going to
Yes.
stand back, or are we going to lean
Yeah.
into it? And depending on how then we lean into it, and whether we are deliberate in our structuring and garner from the first world as to some of the lessons that are applicable here, I think this poses an opportunity rather than a threat.
I like that attitude, and that's exactly what I think we want to portray to all our employees as well. Guys, this is, yeah, it is scary times. It is disruptive. As you said, it's not only on the technology side, the cultural changes. We see that we're still sitting with the, let's call it the burnout from COVID.
Yes.
So there are so many things happening at once, and it is a scary time, but I think it's an exciting time as well. And that's the message we want to leave with our employees. Let's tackle that and be excited. I want to start wrapping up, Willem. And again, I wish we could talk for hours, because it's a really, really interesting. Thanks for that. You also once recommended a book to me. I'm currently actually busy with the book called Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail.
Yes.
I think you're quite excited about that book. And maybe one or two of the concepts or ideas that stood out for you in that book. One that I can remember is this MTP, a massive transformative purpose.
Yes.
Maybe elaborate a little bit about that, and anything else that you've gathered in that book that again can help us going forward.
So Salim did research to say there are companies that are clearly head and shoulders above their competitors. Post big change events like GFC and also others. But what is it that allows them to be so exponentially more successful than their peers? And that's whether you measure revenue growth, customer acquisition, decrease in cost of sales, dividend payout increase, like whatever the metric is, there are just these companies that are head and shoulders. What are they doing? Because of course, once you crack that, you can do consulting for the rest of your life. He found a schematic. He found a schematic to be true, which are 11 attributes. And then interestingly, every single exponential organization that was reviewed, of which there were a whole bunch in North America, a whole bunch in Europe, and then I actually helped with a lot of the research in Africa.
Okay.
And whether it was Northern or Southern Hemisphere, developed market or emerging economy, every single exponential organization that we identified had an MTP, a massively transformative purpose. It is the single thing that company employees and founders get up to do in the morning. It's their reason for existence. So it's not a slogan and it's not a tagline and it's not marketing. It's reason for existence. And it normally seeks to tackle a large problem shared by a variety of users, whether those are corporate or retail, doesn't matter, around which all decisions operate. And then some of the other attributes include, for instance, experimentation. Now, in South Africa, I've just found that older companies, so medium to old-aged companies that have been around the block, seem to develop a culture of penalizing experiments that go wrong. Whereas the first world, and specifically exponential organizations, have a culture of saying experiments, obviously not negligent experiments, but experiments that try to find ways to meet our MTP are great. And when they fail, we should celebrate them and share the learning across the entire organization of how not to do it. The most recent example is, if you've kept your eye on the news and on space travel, of which I'm a big fan, is that the largest spacecraft in the world has just blown up 3 minutes after takeoff. What few people realize is the experiment was to take off. Anything that happened thereafter was a bonus. So they have 3 minutes of bonus. I remember
it said anything behind it or above the tower was a bonus. Yeah.
Exactly. And so lots of bonus that came from it. And when the spacecraft exploded, they zoomed back onto the offices where the people watching and who are responsible, and they were cheering. And the world said, how can you be cheering about this billion-dollar blow up? And they said, one more way of how not to do it, and we found it.
Wow.
So
that's
it's an extreme example, but it talks to the culture inside of an exponential organization. And again, impacted 100% by leadership and how it chooses to respond towards attempts at innovation that might not be successful to its conclusion. So those are 2 examples. There are 11.
Excellent. 11. I'm going to research that a bit. Yeah, there's so many more questions, but maybe 2 more. We've talked about, you've mentioned AI. Now, AI, ChatGPT, everybody's talking about that. People are afraid, people are excited. What's your view of AI and how that will change the world that we live in? And is it something that we need to embrace? You know, I've listened to quite a few of Elon Musk's interviews around AI and warning about the dangers of AI, and if calling now for regulations to be put in place by governments on the use of AI. AI can be used for good. AI can be used for bad. He wants to create the Truth GPT, which is a truth-seeking AI.
Yes.
What's your view on AI?
So AI is one of 16 exponential technology trends that the funds invest in. We seek out AI opportunities and have for the last 8 years. So think 2011, when we said to boards, one day you'll have AI on your board, we were laughed at. And today it's a lot closer in the imagination and understanding of people. So the tagline that I heard that I like is that AI is not going to replace jobs, but someone who has equipped themselves with the skills of how to use AI will be a job competitor for you. And so the impetus on AI and all of the other exponential technologies is on the human to learn how to harness these technologies, because one of the things that you'll read about in Salim's book, and also that Peter Diamandis talks about freely, is the democratization effect of these technology pieces. Digital biology, as an example, 15 years ago, it cost $1 billion to sequence the human genome. Today, kids have the ability to synthesize DNA to the extent that biology has been digitized, and essentially on software create chemical compounds that have the exact same outcome and effect on the nervous system as cocaine does, except it's not illegal because it doesn't have the active ingredients of cocaine. It only has a similar type outcome. And so again, now you think, how does regulation keep up with that? Regulation cannot compete with it until regulators learn to harness these tools and then level the playing field. So leadership has got its work cut out for it, because it's going to have to find ways of exposing employees to these tools in order to keep them competitive.
Interesting. And another interesting thing that you've mentioned, AI is one of 16 exponential technologies. So, it seems that we only hear about AI. So we'd love to explore the other 15 as well. And I think, again, we need to know them and grab onto the opportunities that they create. Last question, and then we...
Can I quickly jump in there? For everyone listening, do this as a test. We've said AI many times today. There are 15 remaining technologies. In a minute, take a pen and a piece of paper and write down as many of those other exponential technologies as what you think you know. And the difference between 15 and your number is the size of your strategic Achilles heel. Because if you don't have the ability to name these technologies that when they converge or individually will impact the way that our industries operate, how are you strategically planning for it?
Very, very important question. So pause the video, guys. Do that little exercise and count your number. And let's work on those opportunities. I want to bring us just quickly back. We're a proudly South African company. We do a lot of our business here, but we also, really, like to see ourselves as an international company. And there's a lot of challenges, getting a footprint there. But I want to talk quickly about the South African situation currently. There's a lot of frustration. All the state-owned enterprises failing, the Eskom's Postnet, or not Postnet, the Post Office, and just sad stories. How do you see the South African company, or the situation rather, and the years ahead, and opportunities for South African companies to still make some money and to add value? Is it all lost?
No, I'm still here. I'm in South Africa right now. I'm having this conversation with you from South Africa. So I am still of the belief that there's a strong future here. I've chosen to adopt the view that these struggles that the country face are opportunities for entrepreneurs to step in and fill those voids.
Yeah.
It's an abundance mindset rather than an incremental mindset. And there are many examples of where eventually government and people's patience just run out, or the skill set is just too limited. And entrepreneurs find cost-effective ways of delivering value in those opportunity sets. But one thing, you must stop reading the news, because they trade on sowing and fertilizing bad news that can cause, I think, a negatively attuned perspective, which is lethal. And don't think that, for instance, on load shedding, which is probably the most prominent one that we're facing right now, load shedding and corruption, but on load shedding, don't think the rest of the world doesn't have it. Part of why you and I took so long to have this conversation stimulated is because there's an opportunity in California right now that we're busy working on to finance a solar installation and a procurement company that is growing at, the last time I think it's 150% per month. Because the grid in California, the 7th largest economy in the world, cannot keep up with the demand from its citizens. So it's not just an incompetence / corruption alleged ESCOM issue. It's a global issue. Yes. Europe is out of power, and Sydney had blackouts, I think it was 3 months ago. So perspective. If we can solve it here, imagine if we took that IP and that talent and we exported it for commercial gain in other spheres of the world. So South Africa has got a lot going for it. It's a great teaching school in your hands.
Wonderful. And I think, Willem, on that very positive note and positive perspective and great advice, let's end our conversation there. I've got this feeling that we're going to see a lot of each other still in future. I'm sure we're going to try and get you back, and also to have a discussion of our exco when it comes to our strategy session. And it's another question I had. I think the time of annual strategy setting is probably way out of the window. It needs to happen much more often and faster, etc. So I'm looking forward to further discussions with you and just getting some more of your insights into our business. From my side, on behalf of our exco senior leadership, all of the employees that listened to this, I think it was very inspiring. Gave us a lot to think about. I really just want to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to talk about something that I'm passionate about. This is not like work for me, so thank you for that opportunity, Stéphan. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.